The roar of 200 motorcycles shattered the silence as flags whipped in the wind, and a Medal of Honor veteran was lifted onto a Harley like a king returning from exile. Inside the elite golf club, glasses froze mid-sip, eyes widened. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The sunlight didn't feel warm anymore. Frank sat quietly in his wheelchair just outside the Westbrook Golf Club's grand entrance, the hem of his slacks catching the breeze, his hands resting motionless on the wheels. The manicured lawns no longer looked inviting. They felt like barriers, like gates meant to keep people like him out. The place was all marble columns and smug silence now. Through the tall glass doors, he could still see Trevor Langford standing stiffly at the concierge desk, back straight, hands clasped like a museum docent guarding a priceless exhibit. Except the only thing being protected here was ego, dressed in tailored suits and polished arrogance. Sarah stood beside him, shaking with rage she couldn't quite contain. Her hands clutched her phone so tightly the screen nearly cracked. She stared at her father, this man who had once carried her on his shoulders through carnivals and rainy parking lots, who'd built her a swing set by hand when she was 6 and kissed her bandaged knees without flinching. Now he looked smaller somehow, dwarfed not by age but by insult, by humiliation delivered without shame. Her jaw clenched. Frank's gaze didn't lift. He stared ahead at nothing in particular, jaw set, the Medal of Honor on his chest catching the light in brief flashes. That medal, earned in a firestorm on a mountainside in Da Nang, clutched against his ribs as he dragged 2 wounded men through mortar fire, meant nothing here. Not to men like Langford. Not to people who'd grown fat on comfort and clean hands. To them, Frank was clutter. A story that no longer sold. A name that didn't belong on guest lists. A silver SUV pulled into the lot. The driver glanced at Frank, then looked away. Another man in golf whites strolled past with AirPods in, not even pretending not to notice. Behind the manicured shrubs, a fountain babbled, mocking the quiet ache in Frank's chest. Sarah crouched beside him, voice low and trembling. "You built homes for men who walked through this very door, and now they act like you're invisible." Frank gave a small smile, tight, worn. "That's the thing about walls, baby girl. Sooner or later they forget who laid the first brick." But Sarah didn't smile back. Her eyes burned, not with sorrow but clarity. A line had been crossed, one they couldn't walk back over with grace or apologies. Something had shifted. Something in her refused to sit down and swallow it this time. She wasn't going to let them turn her father into a ghost. Not today. Not ever. The internet didn't just notice. It erupted. Sarah's photo of Frank, captured in a single moment of quiet devastation, did what no protest or press release could have. It showed the truth, raw and undeniable. Her father, sitting alone in his chair beneath the towering stone arch of the Westbrook Golf Club, with the faint shimmer of a tear tracing the side of his face. Behind him, the proud iron letters spelling Westbrook gleamed like a sneer. There was no shouting in the picture, no fist raised, just the crushing silence of a man who had been told he didn't belong in the very country he bled for. The image struck like lightning across social media. Comments poured in like a tide refusing to recede. "This is what America has come to? My dad served too. This makes me sick. Shame on Westbrook." The hashtags swelled, pulsing with collective fury. Our justice for Frank. Vet. Not welcome. Shashar honor the real elite. The anger wasn't abstract. It was personal. People saw their fathers, their grandfathers, themselves. The veteran community reacted like a family insulted at its core. Old war buddies and forgotten platoon mates began sharing their own stories, stitching together a mosaic of mistreatment, disregard, and the slow erosion of respect they'd endured in silence. Sarah's post had opened something deeper than a single slight. It cracked a dam that had held too long. And then came the comment. Buried among the flood of replies, one name jumped out: Jack Diesel Mathers. The handle was simple, but its weight was unmistakable. A grizzled Marine turned lifelong rider, Jack led the Iron Riders Brotherhood, a sprawling, road-hardened band of veterans that spanned coasts and causes. To most, they were a rumor on asphalt. To those who knew, they were a promise kept. His comment was just one line. I served with Frank in Nam. If he's not welcome, none of us are. It was the kind of message that didn't need volume. It had gravity. Brotherhood ran deeper than blood in their world, and Jack's words made it clear. This wasn't just about one man anymore. It was about all of them. Every vet who'd been thanked on Veterans Day and ignored the rest of the year. Every man and woman who'd been handed a folded flag and left to fold into society without a place. Jack put down his phone. His hand, once steady under fire, trembled with something fiercer than adrenaline. Memory, pride, rage. He didn't need a plan. He needed a head count. And so, with a slow exhale, he called out to the road. Let's remind them who built this country. The sound didn't just roll in. It arrived, like thunder made of steel and resolve. At first it was a vibration in the soles of your shoes. Then a hum, gathering weight. Then a roar, deeper than traffic, more deliberate than weather. It crested over the hills like a storm front in leather and chrome. Westbrook Hills, so proud of its serenity, its curated quiet, had never known a noise so honest. The first bike appeared beyond the stone gates, then another, then a wave, 200 deep, gleaming with polished defiance. Every handlebar flew a flag, the stars and stripes, POWMIA, battalion patches from wars both honored and forgotten. Engines revved in unison, not in aggression, but ritual. The formation tightened as they approached the gates of the Westbrook Golf Club, an armored procession of memory and meaning. Behind the clubhouse windows, champagne glasses stopped mid-air. Forks hung inches above steak tartare. Trevor Langford stood paralyzed, the color draining from his face as one by one, bikes lined up along the circular driveway, their presence an unspoken indictment. Then came Jack. He cut the engine and dismounted in a single practiced motion, walking with the casual authority of a man who'd earned every scar on his body. Without a word, he approached Sarah's truck. The crowd parted. Frank hadn't spoken since the night before. But now, as Jack reached out and placed a calloused hand on his shoulder, something changed. His eyes widened, not in fear, but recognition. Time folded in on itself. The scent of jungle rot and gun oil returned for just a heartbeat. And then, with the help of two other bikers, Jack lifted Frank onto the back of his own Harley, securing him gently as if placing a flag on sacred ground. Around them, silence fell like snow. Then came the trumpet. The first note of taps sliced through the air, brittle and pure. A young Marine Corps veteran with one hand and a steel prosthetic stood alone, playing from memory. No sheet music, just heart. A massive American flag was unfurled from the rear rack of a trike, stretching 20 feet across the lawn. And then, in perfect synchronization, the bikers turned to face the clubhouse, helmets removed, heads bowed. It wasn't a protest. It was a reckoning. Sarah stepped forward slowly, her heels sinking slightly into the earth. Her hands, though trembling, held the microphone steady. She handed it to her father. Frank took it, his knuckles pale against the metal. He looked out at the sea of faces, scarred, aged, unbreakable. When he spoke, it was not loud, but it was final. I bled for this country so we could all sit at any table. not to be told we don't belong. Today, I know I still do. And in that moment, Westbrook's silence was not peaceful. It was ashamed. The sky above Westbrook Hills, once reserved for quiet weather and champagne air, now vibrated with the chop of news helicopters. Camera lenses hunted for angles, reporters clamored outside the gates, and every major network had planted its flag in the well-manicured lawn. A single photo, Frank in his wheelchair, surrounded by bikers and flags, had fractured the pristine image Westbrook Golf Club had built over decades. Now that image was crumbling, live and in HD. The headlines scrolled across every screen in America. Veterans occupy elite golf club after one of their own was shamed. No spin, no euphemisms, just the raw truth. Inside the boardroom, the club's directors scrambled. PR consultants were flown in. Statements were drafted, revised, and diluted until the final apology rang hollow. They called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. But the country wasn't buying it. Neither was the town. Outside, the Iron Riders returned every weekend without fail. They brought folding chairs, coolers, and a quiet, unshakable presence. No yelling, no threats, just unity. They didn't need noise. The silence of their discipline spoke louder than any chant. More townspeople joined in, setting up lawn chairs beside them. Retired Navy men, teachers, single mothers, teenagers who'd seen the video and couldn't unsee it. They came to thank Frank, to stand with him. Because somehow, in one man's quiet rejection, everyone had seen a piece of their own struggle. Veterans drove in from across state lines, some in rusted pickups, others on shining bikes, just for a chance to clasp Frank's hand. He never turned anyone away. He sat beneath a simple canopy with Sarah by his side, receiving them with the same quiet dignity that made his initial humiliation so painful to watch. The tipping point came with the leak. Emails from Trevor Langford to the board, mocking old vets in wheelchairs and urging the club to remain young and brand-friendly. The backlash was immediate. He resigned in disgrace. Lawsuits followed. The board faced open complaints of age and disability discrimination. Public trust imploded. Westbrook had become a symbol not of exclusivity, but exclusion. And then came the forum. Packed. Tense. Veterans filled every seat, every aisle. Voices rose not in rage, but in calm resolve. Policy changed that night, not because of lawsuits or threats, but because the shame had become impossible to deny. 1 month later, Frank Dalton rolled forward, scissors in hand, and cut the red ribbon to a round of thunderous applause. The Frank Dalton Community Pavilion now stood where Westbrook's private garden once bloomed. Built by veterans, funded by strangers, open to all. Barbecue smoke drifted on the wind. Children raced barefoot through fresh grass. On the stage, Jack placed a patch in Frank's hand. The words stitched across it glinted in the sun. Real elite. We never leave our own.